As with a lot of these films, the screenplay was changed, and the script for Part 3 called for Jason to wear a mask to cover his face. Having worn a bag over his head in Part 2, this mask would become a trademark for the character, and one instantly recognizable in popular culture in the years to come in Steve Miner's 1982 film, Friday the 13th, Part 3.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little township.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. My name is Connor Dunham and I am here along with Chris. And today we are doing Friday the 13th Part 3. Now, this originally was released in 3D. I have not seen it in 3D besides the little blue and red, the little cheap glasses. I would love to see this in 3D, but probably not going to happen, at least anytime soon, or unless they do like a re-release of this sometime for an anniversary. But this is one of the ones that I didn't see until a little later on down the road. This I had seen, I stated before, like the seventh one, the sixth one, kind of like the later entries before the first two or three. I seen Part 4. But this is a fun film. I mean, the first three are kind of weird because I always looked at them, back when I was younger as Friday the 13th, 1, 2, and 3. But when, like, the second and third one, when you think about it, and then leading into even the fourth one, it's like Friday the 13th, Saturday the 14th, Sunday the 15th. It's like a weird little pattern they do here. So, Chris, I'll leave you with that.
Yeah. I'm the more that was one thing that kind of drove me nuts as a kid too. Like I'm a little OCD, and when I see that the novelty of the movies kind of picking up right where the other one leaves off is fun. And so like the novelty of it just going for like 2, 3, and 4 being like this trilogy, that's fun. But then it's like, well, heck, these aren't Friday the 13th for, two different movies in this series, which is interesting. Uh this is one I know we talked earlier about, like the early, like when I was young, one of the early memories I have was from Jason Takes Manhattan, where he's chasing him down the subway at the end and gets the acid on him. And then another sort of early memory I have that predates me watching them all would have been the finale of this movie, where you're seeing Jason with his mask off in the window, and then what happens with Chris on the lake. Like those images are also some of those kind of like core, saw them way too young kind of images that kind of stuck in my brain. So this is another one that's a little iconic because of that. I've never seen it in 3D either. I believe that the Shout Factory or Scream Factory box set has a 3D option, but you have to have some kind of display that's 3D equipped. I think there was a box set back in the day that might have had the traditional red and blue glasses 3D version on it, but I know that one I think is out of print now. So I don't so there's not a ton of super simple ways to just be able to watch this in 3D at home, but they are out there. But I've never seen it in 3D.
No, I had the VHS of this back in the day, and then the DVD and the Blu-ray with the red and blue glasses, and that's clearly not going to do it justice. I don't know what that's like a little scapegoat, but seeing it in real 3D would probably be fun for as cheesy and obnoxious as some of the 3D shots are in this film. But
Yeah.
it's all around, coming off the second one. I think it's a pretty decent follow up.
Yeah, the first half of the movie, more so the first third, is filled with a lot of the sort of cheap gags to do the 3D stuff, like poles and bats and just random items being orchestrated carefully to where they're poking out of the screen in like insanely obvious ways, and that takes you out of the experience. But as the movie moves along and it's more organic things like an axe being swung or hands reaching out from the killer or things like that, as you move more towards it, you're not thinking about the obvious 3D aspect of it as much.
Yeah, not at all. And I'll go ahead and get right into it and give a little bit of background and history on the film. Friday the 13th Part 3 is a 1982 American slasher film directed by Steve Miner, produced by Frank Mancuso Jr., and starring Dana Kimmel, Paul Kratka, and Richard Brooker as Jason. It is the sequel to Friday the 13th Part 2 and the third installment in the Friday the 13th franchise. It is set directly after the events of the previous film, and the film marks the first appearance of Jason's signature hockey mask, which has become a trademark of both the character and the franchise, as well as an icon in American cinema and the horror genre in general. Friday the 13th 3 was theatrically released in 3D and is the only film in the series to be released in that format. The film was intended to end the series as a trilogy. However, unlike many of its successors, the film did not include a moniker in its title to indicate it is such. And then the film was theatrically released on August 13th, 1982, and received negative reviews from critics. It was the first film to remove E.T. the Extraterrestrial from the #1 box office spot and became the second highest grossing horror film of 1982 behind Poltergeist.
Very nice. It's always fun. I remember to be the movie that like dethroned ET. I remember I think a big deal was made when it was either The Man in the Iron Mask or Lost in Space. I think it was Lost in Space that finally took #1 away from Titanic when it was like #1 for 15 weeks straight, something like that, you know. So that stuff's always interesting. Yeah, it's an iconic entry. The first introduction of the hockey mask that's kind of never really left the franchise since. It's memorable for that. Uh, and I gotta say, I love rewatching this one and rewatching these entries. I kind of miss the days where sequels would do the thing where they would start with a little bit of a revisit or a recap of the previous entry. Like I know it might be a little sort of like that's not how it's done these days and there's no reason to do it. There's an expectation you've seen the prior movie, but I do kind of dig like starting off like within the prior entry and then moving along. Like it helps you start the movie off in kind of an exciting way with without having to jump right into the action of this movie. Like you get the previous movie kind of counts as like the stinger and the teaser of the beginning of this movie. And I like stuff like that.
Yeah, I also like to speak on what you brought up when movies kind of start like almost like in the middle of a film, like a character, he wakes up and he's in the middle of the desert, and the first half of the movie leads up to him waking up in the desert, and then the second half of the movie is kind of the conclusion of what happens to like how he gets out of the desert or something, something of that sort.
Yeah, I can get into that as long as it's kept to like the first like third or half of the movie where you finally catch up and there's still a lot of movie to go. That can be pretty well done. That can be interesting.
Yeah, I like that. And like you said, the recap, they do a recap in 4, I'm believe, and then another. I don't think they do it in the 6th one or the 5th one. They do a nice little voiceover in the Friday the 13th Part 7.
Yeah.
But I like all that. I like the little recaps and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a way of kind of making it feel, continuity isn't the most amazing in these movies. That wasn't really a heavily thought about thing for cheap horror movies in the 80s. They didn't have like lore experts and continuity experts on every movie, but just like the sort of passing the torch with the footage from the previous and then linking it right into this one. Stuff like that kind of just helps it all feel a bit more kind of cohesive. So I dig it personally.
Absolutely. Well, how about we go ahead and get into a trailer and a plot synopsis on the film, and then we'll come back with the goodies, the fun facts and numbers, and then we'll get into our favorite characters and whatnot.
Sure thing.
Weekends are a good time to escape to the woods. Unless the weekend begins with Friday the 13th. Because 13 is an unlucky number. But out here, so are 1 through 12. Because these are Jason's woods. And nobody leaves them alive. Friday the 13th, Part 3, in 3D. Jason, you can't fight him. You can't stop him. And now, you can't even keep him on the screen. Friday the 13th, Part 3, in 3D. Now, when it comes to killing in Jason's woods, Jason will come to you. Friday the 13th, Part 3, in 3D. A new dimension in terror. It will scare you. Count on it.
After the events of Part 2, a badly injured and unmasked Jason Voorhees goes to a lakefront store for a change of clothes. While there, he murders the store owner Harold and his wife Edna. Meanwhile, Chris Higgins and her friends travel to Higgins Haven, her old home on Crystal Lake, to spend the weekend. The gang includes pregnant Debbie, her boyfriend Andy, prankster Shelly, his blind date Vera, and stoners Chuck and Chili. After running into a man named Abel who warns them to turn back, the gang meets Chris's boyfriend Rick at their destination. At a convenience store, Shelly and Vera get into a confrontation with bikers Ali, Fox, and Loco. Shelly gets in the car and knocks down their motorcycles, impressing Vera. Later, the bikers show up at Higgins Haven, where they take the gas out of the van and attempt to burn the barn down to get even. Jason, inside the barn, murders Fox and Loco with a pitchfork, before beating Ali unconscious. That night, Chris and Rick head out into the woods, where Chris reveals that she was attacked by a deformed man 2 years prior, which prompted her to leave Crystal Lake in the first place. The main reason that she returned was to confront her fears. Her overall memory of the incident is unclear. Back at Higgins Haven, a scorned Shelly scares Vera with a hockey mask and then wanders into the barn, where Jason slashes his throat off-screen. Using Shelly's mask, Jason emerges from the barn. Vera retrieves Shelly's wallet from under the dock, then is promptly shot in the eye with the spear gun. Jason enters the house and chops a handstanding Andy in half with a machete. Debbie finishes her shower and rests on a hammock where Jason thrusts a knife through her chest from beneath. When the power goes out in the house, Chuck goes downstairs to the basement only for Jason to hurl him into the fuse box, electrocuting him. Chili finds a dying Shelly and Jason impales her with a hot fire poker. When Rick's car dies, Chris and Rick are forced to walk back to the house and find it in disarray. Rick steps outside to search the grounds, but Jason grabs him and crushes his skull with his bare hands, making one of his eyes pop out of its socket. Jason then attacks Chris, who narrowly escapes the house and tries to flee in her van. With the van running out of gas, Chris enters the barn to hide, only for Jason to attack again. Inside the barn, Chris strikes Jason over the head with a shovel and hangs him. He regains consciousness and temporarily removes his mask to free himself from the noose, which causes Chris to recognize him as the same man who attacked her 2 years prior. An awoken Ali tries to attack Jason, but Jason quickly finishes him off. The distraction allows Chris to strike Jason in the head with an axe. He staggers momentarily towards her before finally collapsing. Exhausted, Chris pushes a canoe out into the lake and falls asleep. Chris has a nightmare of an unmasked Jason running towards her from the house before disappearing, which then cuts to the decomposing body of Pamela Voorhees with her head attached, emerging from the lake to pull her in. The following morning, the police arrive and escort a traumatized Chris who has gone insane away from Higgins Haven. Jason's body is shown to be lying in the barn, as the lake is shown seemingly at peace. All right, how about I dig into some fun facts for you?
Let's go.
All right, the original storyline was supposed to focus on a post-traumatic Jenny Field who began learning self-defense and returning to college after surviving her ordeal in the previous film. After finding Paul's corpse inside her dormitory, she prepares to track down Jason and face him in a final confrontation. However, this concept was abandoned when Amy Steele declined to reprise her role in this film.
Yeah, and from what I understand, since then she's kind of had the opinion that she thinks she should have accepted it and should have done it, because I mean, who knows what kind of path that might have led to. You know, the what ifs are exciting, and so if they had committed to a third movie being about Ginny, then for all we know, she could have become sort of the Laurie Strode of this franchise in a lot of ways, you know, and so that could have been an interesting sort of path to take to see where that could have led things.
Yeah, I would have welcomed her back. Absolutely. She's easily one of the top final girls in the entire franchise, and she was an absolute kick ass in Friday the 13th Part 2.
Yeah, I think she could have carried, maybe a trilogy of her own. Maybe 2, 3, 4 could have all focused on her in some way in different forms. You know, it could have been interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there was talks of like all the surviving final girls of doing like a final girls showdown uh against Jason, bringing all the final girls into one film, and kind of, there'd be one final girl left at the end. It's
Yeah,
that'd be kind of cool to see.
yeah, I always thought that would be a fun, like, there was a window of time where that would have been like the perfect time place to do it, and it would have been great to have a cast like of the final girls, and it's about and they're the victims too. So you have 4, 5, 6 of the final girls, and then there is only one of them that makes it to the end. That would have been very, very interesting. That would have been a cool movie to do for one of these films.
Absolutely. In order to allow non 3D capable theaters to screen the film, Paramount completed a 7-week long conversion process that cost $2 million, and that was back in 1983. So I mean that was a worthy little conversion process to allow the film to be shown in 2D.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, because I don't know exactly I don't know what the 3D technology was back in the day for this sort of thing. I don't know if it was. I don't think it was like, oh, two cameras side by side filming at the same time or anything. Like there had to be some kind of like you say, like there had to be some kind of process, and it sounds like it could be a difficult technical challenge depending on it. So I mean, yeah, that's interesting, but certainly you want to be able to show a movie without having to force people to see it in 3D.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know some people that 3D gives them a headache or stuff like that, So I mean,
I know
2D
definitely.
might be the way to go for some others.
Yeah, I know definitely the old like red and blue glasses method definitely was a headache inducing thing. The modern stuff, the digital 3D, that never really bothers me. The only general bother I get from that is just wearing glasses for an extended period of time in a dark room and just the light levels and things like that. It's nothing to do with the 3D imagery.
Film scholar Carol Clover notes that the film has historically been cited as one of the most violent in the entire Friday the 13th series.
Hmm. I mean, again, I mean, I know these movies. I'm not really going on a case by case basis, but I mean, it never certainly if you'd asked me the question, which one of them feels like the most violent, I never would have been like, oh well, the Friday the 13th really stands out as the most violent entry. I don't know if it's particularly more or less violent than any of the other movies. I don't know.
I would kind of put it probably middle of the pack.
Yeah, I mean, how do you compare it to something like Jason Goes to Hell and say that this is the most violent entry? Jason Goes to Hell goes nuts with some of the kills.
Yeah. I mean, kind of the farther down we go in some of these, it gets pretty bad.
Yeah,
Definitely rated R.
yeah, but again, when did she say that, and at what point? And it might have just been the nature of some of the kills and things like that. Some of the, it might have just felt mean spirited at the time. Who knows? But each to their own.
Absolutely, I agree. For his appearance in this film, Jason Voorhees was nominated for AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains as one of the top 50 villains. It doesn't give me an exact number of what he was ranked, but he was in the top 50. So
Top
you're
50,
doing pretty good.
top 50 movie villains overall. Just
Yes.
of all movie villains. Well, hell, I mean, how do you not put Jason? How do you not put these slasher icons? Like, they should all be in the top 20, I think.
That's what I was going to
Most
go.
most movie villains in general don't have entire franchises that they were villains for. Like even Darth Vader gets basically 3 movies. So
Yeah, Jason's got what,
a dozen.
11 technically, or
yeah, 11. Yeah, however you want to shake it out. Yeah,
you want to count Roy out? Then we got 10.
yeah, and then Freddy versus Jason maybe, so 12.
Last one I got for you is the film was novelized twice. The first book was written by Michael Avalon and published in 1982 to coincide with the release of the film, while the second adaptation was published in 1988 by Signet, and the latter novelization was written by Simon Hawke, who had previously written novelizations for the first, second, and the 6th installment in the series.
It would be interesting to, not that this is something I would ever pursue, but it would be interesting to see the 2 different novelizations. And it's like, because to do a novelization of a kind of a schlocky slasher movie that's like 90 minutes long, it's like how much of a wild and in-depth or versatile novel could you really write? And it has 2 novelizations. So it would be interesting to compare and contrast those 2 different novel adaptations of this 90-minute 3D slasher movie.
Well, I like reading movie novelizations, so like just out of curiosity, when I started getting into actually reading them, I started looking stuff like the Halloween films and Friday the 13th and all those to see what was actually novelized back in the day. And these were novelized, and they're easily going for 120, 150,
Oh
200,
gosh.
$225 per
I've
book.
heard that in particular, some of the Halloween novels, not necessarily like both both the adaptations of the movies, but also some of the novels that are sort of their own thing or their own spin-offs or sequels. I've heard that a number of those are actually very, very good. So I mean, you can on YouTube you can find people like doing their own audiobook versions of some of these novels. So maybe it exists for Friday the 13th Part 3. But it's just interesting because it's like you got to imagine that the kills are probably essentially the same, the plot's probably essentially the same. So the 2 adaptations, you think the dialogue is at least going to be generally a match to the movie. So it's 2 adaptations of essentially the same thing. So it's like, what level of departures could 2 different novelizations make? So it would just be an interesting, clash of styles or contrast of styles to see.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I've seen some of those Halloween novelizations, as high as like $450, $500 for a 1980 novelization of, a rerun of the 1978 film or something. It's insane. Like some of the stuff that's like on eBay or even Amazon, I've found them as high as 300 like $25 for a book, and I'm like, I don't know who's buying this, but I need to borrow some of their money.
It's that lost media kind of a thing. If something's scarce and something is out of print, then it's that idea that one day I might be one of the last few people that has one. And then who knows? It's just that idea of like having something that's very exclusive that that other people don't have access to.
Just like our previous franchise, Godzilla versus Biollante, hard to find and everybody wants it. That's a fan.
Yep. It was the long window there, the long road to mass production.
Well, that's all I have for you for fun facts on this one. I'll dig into some quick numbers for you, get some budget going and whatnot for it.
Sounds good.
Friday the 13th Part 3 had a budget of $2.2 million. You want to do our conversion there for today's money?
Oh, here, yeah. You keep talking and I'll pull it up.
All right.
You said 2.2 million?
Yep, and it grossed 36.7 million.
All right, hold on. And it was what, 1982? Hold on. All right, so 2.2 million in 1982 would be 7.1 million today, and then you said it made 36 million, correct?
Yes, 36.7.
All right, 36.7. That would be about 119 million today. So imagine you drop basically 7 million on a movie and you make basically 120 million back. That's kind of like what they do with when you see those Insidious movies and the Conjuring movies and some of those Blumhouse films. That's almost what you're seeing. You're seeing like 10 million or less budgets and sometimes, 100 million plus at the box office.
And they're never, I mean, if it's sequel worthy, if you have characters still alive in it or your main antagonist, if you didn't completely chop his head off or blow him up or something, you're probably going to bring him back and spend, on your next film, it'll be a year or whatever later. So you'll probably spend 3 million and you'll still make 80 million or something. There'll probably be a little bit of a drop off, but there's no wonder that slasher films back in the 80s were just cranked out.
Yeah, even if you spend 10 million and make 50 million, that's still a gravy train,
Yeah.
It's this is a weird off-topic thing, but you just mentioned, the whole like they don't really like chop the head off or do anything permanent so that you can keep bringing it back for a sequel. And sometimes I wonder if modern movies are a bit more focused on a lot of times they're focused on more supernatural villains like demons and spirits and ghosts and stuff because it kind of completely sidesteps that idea. Like the minute it's like a physical guy, it's like, well, just shoot that guy and set him on fire and blow him up and then he's totally done. But if you're dealing with some kind of like demon, spirit, ghost, what have you, you can kind of defeat him and then just have any kind of contrived way of being like, well, he wasn't really gone in the follow-ups. I don't know. That was just something that came to mind that I thought about, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it starting back in the day with like Paranormal Activity and all those, a haunting in Connecticut and stuff. That I don't know what it is about those films, but some people just like a easy haunting scare.
Yeah,
What
and
is it
I think some
called?
of it is when it feels because when it's just sort of quote unquote a guy slash quote unquote a monster, there's something kind of tangible about it, which is like, well, just machine gun it, blow it up, chop its head off, dice it to pieces. When it's kind of a demon or a spirit or a possession or something like that, it's sort of intangible, and you feel like there's not really anything you can do about it. They always have to defeat it with some kind of exorcism or prayer or what have you, something kind of like on a higher plane of existence. In the Insidious movies, they got to like go into the demon realm of the further, like so I think like that's kind of one of those things where it's like it's easier to sort of scare people or to get behind the idea of scaring people with something that feels sort of otherworldly.
Yeah, almost like a long story short, you can run from a man or a monster. You can't really run from a demon or a spirit.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, all right. Friday the 13th Part 3 holds an approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes of only 7% based on 29 reviews with an average rating of 3.7 out of 10.
That's just racism.
Metacritic is a little better. It has a weighted average score of 30 out of 100 based on only 7 critics, indicating generally unfavorable reviews.
Yeah, that's better. That's better. What's
Uh,
Google telling us?
87% of Google users liked this film.
That's about right.
And then here's a good one for you. It has the third most attendance of the Friday the 13th franchise with approximately 11,762,400 tickets sold.
That's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive.
Here's the numbers we care about. There are 12 deaths in the film, averaging out to 1 kill about every 8 minutes, and Jason is on screen for 9 minutes and 10 seconds, or about 10.5% of the film.
It's about right. That sounds, that seems to be, That sounds like a good number to me. Doesn't seem excessive. Doesn't seem like too little.
Yeah, our first one was one kill every 9.5 minutes. Friday the 13th Part 2 was every 9.6. So we're a little on the quicker side here with one every 8 minutes.
Yeah, as they ramp up the number of kills and don't increase the run times, that's only gonna that's only gonna increase over time, I think.
Yeah, and I'm all right with that. I think one every 8 is a almost like a perfect number. Like 6, anywhere from like 6 to 10.
Yeah.
Keep just enough to keep us interested.
Yeah, I mean, you take out the credits of these movies and you're essentially dealing with more or less an 80-ish minute movie most of the time around here, 80, 85 minutes, something like that. And so I think, you average, a tenth of the movie, about 8 to 10 minutes is about a 10% of the movie. I think, every time you get about a tenth of the way through the movie, you get another decent kill, and then Jason's in about a tenth of the movie, I think that's, you got to mix it up a little bit. It's not like seeing a giant monster where you really want to see it. It's like the whole point is that you don't want to see Jason, but that you're getting POV shots or seeing what he's doing without necessarily seeing him. So like it kind of, it's like you don't want the killer to be on screen all the time in a movie like this. That kind of defeats the point. So there's that balance you got to strike.
Yep, you want him, like we said, but I think we said it in the second one. We were
Yeah,
talking about later films. You want him lurking in the shadows a little bit.
exactly.
All right, Chris, that's all I got for numbers. Some quick numbers and fun facts for you on this one. We want to dive right into who your favorite character was.
Uh, yeah. So I mean, I will say as a bit of a disclaimer, this is the first movie where it feels like you start to feel a little justified to be like, hey, Jason's my favorite character. It's like Jason's kind of coming to his own as a character and is like kind of interesting, and the dynamic now is playing out that the franchise as a whole is more about Jason than any of these characters who are only in one or two movies. So it's kind of this shifting sort of plates here. But it's like I won't say Jason because you can't, you're not really supposed to say Jason. So of all of the victims, I'd say it's probably a two-way tie between Chris and Debbie. Chris, not just because the she's a lady that also shares my name, but she's an interesting, a sort of like a softer, good girl kind of a protagonist. That happens with a lot of the final girls, but she's something very kind of wholesome about her character, I guess. With the even though she's got this like darker past thing that happened to her, but then Debbie's interesting to me is because she always gives me kind of like I watched Friends a lot on TV when I was a kid. Like whether it was like with my mom or my brother, it was just on TV while I was doing homework or something. And something about Debbie always kind of gave me like Jennifer Aniston vibes, in the same way that the one character from Friday the 13th Part 2 always kind of made me think of like Sean William Scott from American Pie and like the way he was. Something about Debbie and like her kind of like tone of voice and sarcasm kind of always made me think of like Rachel from Friends. I don't know. So I always just like kind of liked her character. And you know, there's a version of reality where the final girl in a movie like this would be the character who is a pregnant lady. They set that like that's a setup that could have easily been the final girl setup. Like, oh, the pregnant girl is the one that makes it to the end. And so she's not never really set up as the main person, but she's kind of got like this candidate where it's like, she's got some of the check marks that might make someone a final girl, and then she's not. So it's just it's an interesting character to have thrown into one of these movies. So I always liked those two characters.
Yeah, I like our final girl, Chris, and then I like Debbie. I clearly like her sarcasm. Her boyfriend Andy, he's he's sarcastic and everything. There's a good it's a good group of characters in this film. They kind of
Yeah.
mesh well off of each other, it seems.
Yeah, can I ask you your opinion on Shelley?
I will say I liked parts because I was that prankster
Uh-huh.
when I was younger. I had a Michael Myers mask, and I would always scare my older sister and have her running for the hills. When she came home from cheerleading or something after back in the day in high school or something. So I would do fun stuff like that. But he is a little whiny. He's a little annoying.
Yeah.
But I'll give him credit for being the one who, you know, Jason gets the mask from.
Yeah.
But he's just okay in my opinion.
Yeah, it's sort of one of those things where when I'm a little younger, you kind of feel bad for him a little bit because he's sort of like the, not trying to offend anyone here, he's kind of like the ugly fat guy in the movie, and he's sort of like the loser character in some regards. And and I think everyone's gone through that phase where whatever they were insecure about themselves about, they sort of use like jokes and humor to compensate, whether it's as extreme as this or not. But like, you kind of like mask anything you're dealing with by just like joking and throwing on a smile and being a goofster about it to kind of take the attention away. And so like, I think everyone can kind of relate to that a little bit. I asked because I've seen reviews of these movies where some people are like, I can't believe all of the other characters hate his guts so much just because he pulls off a couple of pranks. Like, they act like he's like killing kittens or something. And then there's other people that are like, why would anyone like this guy? He's a total douchebag. All he does is annoy them and play mean pranks and try and be like awful to them. So it's like, I've seen the total ends of the spectrum of people that like absolutely hate him and think he's a jerk. And then the people that are like, do not understand why the characters in the movie loathe him so much or seem to be so frustrated by him. It's like, so I just wanted to get opinions on it. I'm a little middle of the road. He's kind of like an unfunny like Jonah Hill or Seth Rogen hybrid or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, you can tell they're trying to make him sympathetic, but it's hard to be terribly sympathetic for him, because he just kind of seems like I don't know. He seems like, instead of trying to be funny to compensate for being a little bit of an outcast, he's kind of just being a jerk bag to compensate for it. So it's like, well, I don't have that much sympathy for you. I don't know. Just my
Yeah,
opinion.
it's like he's almost rude, but trying to get people to feel sorry for him. So
Yeah, exactly, exactly. You're not a pity case if you're going to keep being this jerk. And I've like, and watching the movie, I would have to assume that he would know what happened to Chris at this lake in the past, or at least would be made aware of it, or that his roommate would have informed him, so that maybe like pranks like that are kind of in poor taste. I don't know. I don't know.
well, I just speaking of Shell, while we were talking about Shelly, I thought about something about Debbie. Another reason we like her is she's reading the Fangoria magazine, and she flips to the Godzilla section and kind of hangs out there for a little bit.
Yeah, and you see that it's talking about, the images is Godzilla versus Megalon, and it's talking about celebrating what, 20 something years of Godzilla or what have you. So it's, yeah, I always thought that was so fun as a kid, when you're a fan of both of these things and you're randomly watching one and it has this overt reference to another one. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like worlds are colliding. It's like, it's all like two different things that I'm a fan of are referencing each other. That's so cool.
Yep, I forgot to bring that little bit up in fun facts. So I remembered, and I was like, I got to bring it up. That's
Yeah.
very important to this.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's fun.
Yeah, I for my favorite character, I ended up choosing Rick. He's just a farm boy trying to honestly, and most people that are watching this film back in the day are teenagers,
Hmm.
and they can all relate with him. They're trying to
He's trying
get
to
it
get with
on with the
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
girl,
He's
and
trying to get with the pretty city girl. Yeah, like you can, and he seems like, and it's always fun. There's always kind of one of these characters in these movies that whether you have one that he's kind of like the guy's guy kind of a mold. Like, he seems like, oh, this is like the big strong man, and then they always get absolutely annihilated. And so it's always fun to pick that character out in one of these movies. Like, he gets his head crushed and his eye pops out. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, that's fantastic.
that's exactly what I was gonna say. Is he is not a small man, and he gets manhandled.
Hmm. Hmm.
He's my favorite character though. He like one of the things he does is as soon as he sees Chris, he puts her against the wall, starts kissing her, and she pushes him away, and he's like, in my imagination, or it just get cold in
Yeah,
here.
he's
Like,
he's wasting he's wasting no time. And
no,
like, it's kind of funny. He says like he hasn't seen her in months or whatever, that he goes months without seeing her. It's like, and your first thing to do is to just start putting the moves on her. Like, geesh, man, hold it together.
only so many cold showers he can take.
Yeah, pace yourself, buddy. Pace yourself. You came on a little strong.
I'll go ahead and give you my favorite score for the film. We might be in cahoots on this one, but I ended
Here,
up choosing the main title.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can I preempt you and just say that I went with the boring choice of the main title?
Yep. We're both choosing the main title here, and that sounds like
It's
this.
groovy. It's groovy.
Boy, that makes me want to go get like a perm or something and go out and bust a move. You better look
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, like hit the disco or something like that. Yeah,
Man.
it's got more. The kids these days would say that opening title music has more sauce than the entire film does. That it's got more going on. That it's got more panache and zest than most of the rest of this movie. It's got more like pop art sensibilities and energy. And these films are kind of, not to be mean, but they're sort of stylistically kind of bland. They're sort of Americana, straightforward, nothing very slick or stylish or flashy about them. Yet that song feels like it could be in a totally different kind of movie than this. It's like there's some of the sound effects that sound like, oh, you could see like it set to like some cheesy UFO footage or something like that. I don't know, but it's interesting. It's fun. It stands out because of that. It's kind of iconic in that weird way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of the soundtrack in this film, as we've said before, pretty much through the first like 7 or 8 films, are a lot of the same music redone. So, I mean, that opening title is a little different. It catches you by surprise, and I think that's the reason I picked it.
It certainly stands out the most. Yeah.
Did you have a favorite quote or memorable line from this film?
Uh, yeah, there's a dialogue exchange that I like a lot, and I think it's aged like a fine wine over time. Is between Andy and Shelley, and Andy says, "Damn it, Shelley, why do you always have to be such an asshole?" And Shelley says, "Sorry, and I'm not an asshole. I'm an actor." And then he says, "Same thing." Like, you can't beat that. It's like, in this day and age too, it's like, yeah, most actors are a-holes. They just run their mouths, and so it's fun to just poke and laugh at them.
Yeah, I there's a couple good lines in here. I ended up choosing a dialogue exchange as well, and I believe it was between Chili and Chuck, and they said, Chili goes, "Did I hear you screaming?" And Chuck goes, "Oh, it was probably Debbie having an orgasm. How come you never scream when we have sex?" And Chili goes, "Give me something to scream about." And then she screams, and he's like, "What's the matter?" And she goes, "Nothing. I was just practicing."
Yeah, that's a fun one. That's cheeky stuff like that. It's always fun to laugh at stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know why that one. I hadn't seen this movie in a while, so I put that in, and I honestly, it just gave me a chuckle. I laughed for a good little bit at that, and I was just like, that's something I could see or hear like some of my friends and their girlfriends saying, like, we're all out to dinner or something, and they're just being a smartass, or at a haunted house or something. That's something they say, and you just bust a gut laughing about it.
Exactly, exactly. It's a good bit of natural dialogue. There's nothing natural about the names of those characters. Well, I mean, Chuck is fine, but who the heck goes by Chili as their name? But, whatever. I'm sure going through these movies, eventually you just start to run out of names to give these people because all the generic names get taken. But I was like, a character named Chili. That's so weird.
Yeah, I mean, so some of the other people, we can Fox. That's some kind of a name you don't really hear too often
Yeah,
in
Loco.
film.
At least you could say that those are maybe like their gang names or whatever, like their aliases or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. Fox, Ali
Yeah. Which, I
was
mean, I'm not one. I don't like to do the whole like, oh, these movies aged horribly, and let's judge them all with modern lenses. But it's like it's the black gangster who's named Ali, right? Like,
yeah.
it's like, oh, geez, okay, fair enough, whatever.
I really when when Ali, you think he's dead earlier in the film, and then he comes back at the
Yeah.
end. I was just that was one of those scenes I was hoping as soon as you see him come out that he's gonna give Jason, a little two piece or something, and he doesn't
Yeah.
even get the chance.
Yeah, as a kid, I always, because I think a kid you kind of identify with like fighting and the good guy versus the bad guy kind of thing. So as a kid, I was always really into these movies when the hero would get their licks in, or when one of the characters would kind of put up a bit of a fight before being taken out. I was always really into those vibes. I was always terribly disappointed with Ali, and how, initially in the movie he goes at Jason, he's immediately clocked and is just out like instantly. And then he comes back and you think like, oh, maybe he's going to help a little bit. And he's literally just like a 2-second distraction to get his arm chopped off. It's like, wow. It's like he stepped up and immediately got put down.
Yeah, and again, he wasn't a small guy either. So you think him coming back, he grabs Jason, and like I don't know if he was trying to like turn him around or what, but Jason swings that machete, and you think maybe he'll turn him around and just clock him in the hockey mask once or twice before he gets
Mhm.
killed, and nope, he gets his arm cut off, and it's over from there.
Yeah, just done. Characters later in the franchise that we'll get to, they get to fare a little better than Ali.
Yes, yes, yes. I know what you are talking about, and I might have just finished the research on that one.
Perfect, perfect.
All right, I'll give you my favorite scene for the film, and it was the barn battle finale when Chris goes in there and kind of locks it, and kind of what we just talked about with Ali kind of making a surprise appearance after we thought he was dead earlier in the film. It just she actually tries to give him a little fight. She hits him in the back of the head with the shovel. She pushes him off and like kind of hangs him, or what should have broken his neck, but comes down and opens the door and ends up hitting him in the head with the axe. She's doing everything she can to win this battle, and I kind
Yeah.
of give her a little pat on the back for that. Give her an attaboy because she, I guess you could say she earned to live a little longer, even though she kind of looked like she was going crazy at the end of the film.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's that good kind of like third act where it's a little like maybe Terminator 2, it's like this long, prolonged sort of chase fight where you just feel like maybe the heroes are slowly chipping away at the villain and slowly gaining some momentum of winning. She like stabs him in the leg at one point, and then she tries to hang him. She's, doing this and that, the other. Then she finally, you know, gets him in the head with the axe. One of my favorite musical moments in the movie that's not just the song is when she's coming after him with the knife in the hallway, and she's sort of just out of reach with her swings, or he's sort of just moving out of reach, and like the music is timing with the swipes and the moves very well, and it's like this wild kind of moment, like where it shows off Jason's reflexes and her sort of being panicked, just swinging at him randomly with the knife. I always liked that moment, and yeah, the axe to the head is it's an iconic piece of the franchise's history, because so many incarnations of the Jason mask have that axe notch knocked out of them automatically as part of the character design. So it's always fun to see.
It is that is a great scene. The last third of this film, the first 15 minutes, the attack scene on the couple at like the little grocery store is nice and good, the recap. But this movie definitely has about 40 minutes where it just, if you've seen it multiple times and you rewatch it, it drags. But then that last
Hmm.
half hour, 35 minutes maybe, where the killings start happening and Jason pops up, it gets pretty good and pretty intense for, a earlier Friday the 13th film.
Yeah, and I think, and I mean, it might be a little bit. It feels like a lot happens in this one, and again, I don't have exact numbers or metrics or whatever, but it feels like maybe the main character, or most of the characters kind of don't realize that like something's going wrong until like later in this movie than maybe the first two. I don't know if that makes sense. Like maybe it just feels like in the first two that like the sort of ominous or awareness that things are going bad or weird feels like it's more present in the movie earlier. And this one, it feels like it's just a lot of the deaths and kills are happening without most people noticing or realizing. I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of weird, but there is a stretch there where it's like there's killings going on, but it doesn't feel like the energy of the movie's elevated to like, oh my gosh, we're in like killer movie mode. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, I agree. I mean, they even, Shelly the prankster, he jokes around earlier on in the film. So in this one, when he finally does get his, they think he's joking around until Chili
Yeah.
kind of pushes him over and realizes, oh, this guy's really dead.
Yeah, which I think is an excellent, that's such an excellent death for that character that, he's sort of the boy who cried wolf, I really dig that.
Yeah, it's I didn't expect it. If somebody's knocking at the door, but as the crowd, that he's not joking this time. You know that he got kind of what was coming to him.
Mhm. Mhm.
Did you have a favorite kill in the film or a death
Oh,
scene?
I absolutely have a favorite kill in the movie, and it's when Vera is out in the water getting the wallet, and Jason walks out with his mask on and the harpoon gun and shoots the harpoon and gets her right in the eye, and then as he slowly kind of strides away, he drops the harpoon gun very casually and just keeps walking. I think that's like a legendary scene in the franchise for me.
It's a very lackadaisical walk, like he's strolling through the grocery store shopping or something. Like, oh, like what do I want today? Like he just doesn't care.
Yeah, and it's so yeah, and it just feels so you can just take that scene and show it to people and it's sort of like instantly iconic, and it just feels like he is like just taking care of business, like he's got this purpose and it's to kill people in violent ways, and he's just getting the work done.
Well, technically it's his first kill under the hockey mask as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's special in a lot of ways, and they certainly gave him a, intentional or not, they give him an excellent sequence to be revealed with the hockey mask, get a great kill, and get like this great like walk off moment. Like you almost feel like if you were to see a re-release of this movie with a crowded theater, that you'd be getting applause as he walked away from that kill.
Yeah, the only thing that I question about it is how did she not know it wasn't Shelley sooner? I mean, the guy's like 6'3", muscular, bald. I,
Yeah, he doesn't look anything like Shelley.
if I seen him walking towards me, I'm gonna be like, all right, well, something isn't right here. So I'm probably gonna try to get away. Shelley's this chubby little. I mean, he might have been 5'9", 5'10" in this film, I'm guessing. And then you got a 6'3" guy who's bald and muscular. I think I
Yeah,
could
I
tell
mean,
the difference pretty easily.
yeah, the only to even try to play, advocate for the scene is like, okay, it's maybe farther away. He's kind of known for some disguises, so like maybe like that it does like the head or the face and whatnot, but it's like it's still it would have been not that you'd want to cast Shelley as like this imposing guy when he's trying to be this like kind of like pudgy, short, stumpy guy. But it's like yeah, it's like you kind of got to really argue to justify her just assuming that that's Shelley. I mean, I guess the mask is kind of supposed to be the thing, like she's in the water and she's probably like she's like panicking and feeling bad that she dropped this thing in the water, and then she just sees someone in the mask. I guess immediately triggers that she thinks like, oh my gosh, it must be Shelley. I got to start apologizing for dropping his wallet, and it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, I guess you can kind of hand wave it, but not really. It doesn't look anything like Shelley.
No, and she clearly starts to realize that, who are you? What are you doing?
Yeah.
And then before
Yeah.
she knows it,
Yeah,
it's
at
too
least
late.
yeah, at least she's not that dumb. At least she doesn't have at least she's not like, "Hey, Shelly, what are you doing with that harpoon gun?" Like
Yeah, put that down. Somebody's gonna get
yeah.
hurt, and then you're
Yeah,
dead.
she like straight up has this like, "What?" Like, yeah, so it's I think it kind of works.
Absolutely. I ended up going with the one you spoke on earlier, and that was Rick, because you see Chris come out looking for him. She's like, Rick, where are you? And you see just the glimpse of Jason standing there holding Rick. He's got one arm kind of wrapped around him, one arm around his mouth. And Rick he's struggling. He's a big guy, and Jason's just standing there acting like nothing's happening. And then she closes the door and it flips to the scene where Jason just picks him up by his bare hands, crushes his head, and his eye pops out and he drops him. And to me, that just it it shows that it shows the power that this guy's not messing around. He's here to take care of anyone, no matter how he's able to do it with his hands, with a spear gun, a knife, a machete, whatever he has to do, he's going to get it done.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it just clear brute strength against a guy who, I mean, wasn't really struggling lifting those bales of hay earlier in the film. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Jason's got to be a little somewhat not human here.
Yeah, he's definitely, he's got that he's got a certain kind of strength. He's got a certain kind of strength about him, the sort of wilderness strength, the sort of psycho in the woods kind of strength.
Yeah, he's not struggling. He's not somebody that I would like to run into. It's crazy that, we always have a final girl and the big jock guy gets just dismantled by the guy that the final girl always ends up outsmarting.
Yeah, I know. Where's all the articles calling the horror genre sexist for always having a final girl? Where's all the outrage there? I don't see a lot of that. No one's out here calling these franchises like misandrist or anything because there's always a lady who makes it to the end. That's because some people have thicker skin than other people and they don't care.
Hey, I don't care.
Yep. Yep.
All right, what real quick for this one, what did you think of Jason's design or outfit in this film? Once he loses the burlap sack.
Uh-huh. So I dig it. It's kind of like a clean, simple kind of baseline design. I'm not a huge fan of the overalls and plaid. So or the burlap sack. Like it's like a good movie, a good look for that movie part 2, but it's like this doesn't feel like the sort of like the iconic silhouette, like the hockey mask, like it's such an image, it's such a clear kind of clean image. And then the sort of, I mean, the jacket and pants, I mean, that is what it is. That's kind of whatever. But the hockey mask is kind of it's just got this purity and simplicity to it and this kind of ominous kind of menace about it. It's like it just works. It just works.
Yeah, he has a very he's dressed up in this film, It's like he's got dress pants and a dress shirt on, and then later on it just adds the hockey mask.
Yeah, it's an odd, it's an interesting ensemble, and I kind of like Jason, like a live Jason before he becomes sort of zombie Jason. He has this like pale putrid look to his skin, and I kind of dig that a little more than like charcoal skin zombie Jason. Like the charcoal skin thing is kind of neat and fun, and zombies tend to kind of have that look. But I kind of like this like gross, pale, sickly skin tone as well.
Yeah, like he's still uglier than hell, but he has deformities that you could probably see an actual human having.
Yeah, to an extent, yeah.
Yeah. All right. We are almost through Friday the 13th part 3. Do we want to get into our tier ranking or our film ranking of these first 3?
Okay, sure. Why don't you lead the way?
I can do that. In my bottom spot at number 3 is the original Friday the 13th. 2 spot would be this film and Friday the 13th part 3. And still up at number 1 is Friday the 13th part 2 for me.
I would agree with that. There's things about this that I love a lot more than 2 in terms of Jason's design and look. His a number of his kills in this one, but there are things about it that like we talked about, like the characters just seem a bit more like they're just randomly hanging out. So it all just feels, there's a number of things that just feel kind of like randomly integrated. Like, oh, they go to the store and then they meet these gang people that are trying to rob them, and then they follow them back to the cabin just so we can have 2 or 3 more victims here. It just kind of feels a little random. It's just people kind of hanging out. And whereas the first one still kept, or the second film still kept like the camp counselor plot. So it's like, just in terms of that, not the plot is everything in these movies, but and also the 3D thing, like, say what you want, but like it hasn't aged very well. Like it's this very obvious thing, and it's kind of distracting, and it's kind of corny, and it's just kind of like this dated aspect of the movie. It's like, oh, it's Friday the 13th 3D, and everything was sticking out at the frame, and it's just like this unnatural way of like filming and making the movie. So it's like stuff like that isn't terribly exciting. If we could have gotten Jason with the hockey mask in part 2, that would have been awesome, and that movie would be near perfect. But overall, part 2 is stronger than this one.
Yeah, the only thing that holds this one back for me from taking that top spot is probably just the few moments in the film that drag a little bit. I feel like part 2 kind of it flows better. It has more rewatchability for me. That's the only thing that holds 2 above 3. And I also like Jenny a lot, so that
Yeah,
helps.
well, and funny thing, going by Wikipedia here, this movie's about 8 minutes longer than part 2. And while 8 minutes is not the end of the world, when you're talking about 80 and 90-minute movies, you're talking about being a movie that's basically 10% longer. And not that these things have to be like breakneck pace, but every minute counts in this stuff, and you kind of want your movies to be effective and efficient. And I think especially slasher movies of this variety, I think they definitely should kind of be in that kind of under 90 minutes, barely 90 minutes kind of a runtime. Like these things, like they got to hit the ground running and like go until they're done kind of a thing. So I think that, not that that's everything, but I think that might be a little bit having to do with why this one seems to kind of drag a little bit.
Yep, I completely agree with you. And the first one being down there, that's just that, nothing against it. It's just Friday the
Yeah.
13th is one of those franchises where the films just they continue to get better up to a certain point. So
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that this movie, because this is still a few just early days, and so they were drastically sort of inventing and adding as the movies went along. And one thing that this film seemed to try to introduce that the franchise then seemed to kind of abandon is this whole, when Chris is telling her story of her attack by Jason, it has this sort of uh implication that he might have, when he quote attacked her, that it might have been in a sort of a sexual manner. And so it seemed like the movie was kind of trying to add in this like thread, the sort of like graping revenge thread that some of these sort of exploitation movies had, or that kind of side of it. When they're talking on the broadcast in the early part of the movie, they talk about like cannibalism and sexual mutilation of some of the corpse. So it seemed like they were trying to thread in this like this sort of darker, grosser angle of what Jason might be getting up to, and it doesn't really ever get explored anything beyond just these little hints in this movie. But I thought it was interesting that they were maybe trying to add that in, but generally speaking, I'm kind of glad that those threads didn't really get developed further in this franchise.
yeah, we can leave that for like The Hills Have Eyes and Wrong
Yeah,
Turn and those kind of
yeah,
movies.
exactly. And it seemed like it was maybe trying to, thread a little bit of that energy in there without really going for it. And it's like, well, we can best, that stuff is best left for some of those other movies.
Yeah, we'll leave it right there. And then with that, we'll go into some final thoughts on this film and then talk about what we're going to do on the next episode. I'm sure people can guess.
Yeah, we're jumping to part, 7, right? That's where you go.
All right, so final thoughts for me on this film are, it's a good one if you haven't seen it. Just like a lot of pretty much every film we've done so far, the Godzilla franchise so far, and these Friday the 13th, their history, they're made for a reason. They're popular for a reason. And if you haven't seen them, give them one watch. If you don't like it, well, at least you gave it a shot. But these are films that we grew up on, and we want to get other people to watch them if they haven't. And if you have seen it, throw it on again. Try to enjoy it. Throw it on with the kids once they're of an appropriate age or something. Let's keep these films going because they're going to be around forever. Jason is going to come back to the big screen eventually. When, who knows? But I think that this, for a third film, it's a solid film. I would recommend it. And, clearly it's in my 2 spot out of the 3 for the rankings so far. So give it a try or give it a rewatch.
Yeah, it's an important step for the franchise as it's sort of finding the mold. This is where it starts to turn a little bit from you're watching these movies to have like a scary time and hope that at least one or two of the characters doesn't get killed by the killer. This is where it feels like it's starting to turn a little bit of like you're coming to these movies to see the killer do their thing, which it's like it's a different vibe. It's not necessarily better or worse. It's just a different energy. I did always love. I wanted to mention that you mentioned a little bit earlier how Chris is basically driven mad by the end of the movie. She's like absolutely insane in the back of the cop car. And I always loved that about this one, that it's like, yeah, anyone who went through something like this probably would be driven to the point of insanity by the end of it. So that's kind of it's an opportunity to give her this sort of tragic conclusion that's not, oh well, she just got killed and didn't make it. She gets to kind of lose in a different kind of a way, by being kind of like mentally broken. So I always thought that was an interesting sort of bittersweet touch to the end of this movie. But yeah, it's a solid entry in the franchise. It's a necessary entry in the franchise. The hockey mask is the icon of the series, and it finally gets introduced here. Jason sort of feels a bit more fully formed by the end of this one. We've gone through the bag phase, now we're in the hockey mask phase, and the sort of unstoppable killer era. So like, it's a good entry. It's very solid.
Absolutely agree with everything you said. Next week, we are going to continue the Friday the 13th franchise with Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, which was released on April 13th, 1984. And that is an absolute fan favorite. So before we get to that, Chris, I will say thank you again. This is like our 40th episode or so, somewhere around there, and it just
Yeah.
keeps going strong.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe Friday the 13th, the final chapter. I can't believe they only made 4 of these movies. It's just wild, just insane to think about that they stopped at 4, that they had the integrity to call it the final chapter and not make any more.
Yep, I know. As good as it was, we couldn't get a sequel, and we've been asking for years.
I know. I mean, just think if they hadn't stopped, we might have like 12 of them by now.
Yeah, including a remake and a crossover.
Yeah, I know, man. We could be waiting on the next one as we speak.
Hopefully soon, my man.
Yep. Exactly. It's always a pleasure, and we'll be back next time.
Absolutely. So once again, thank you for joining me. Thanks anyone who's listening to this, and until next time.
God damn it, Shirley. Why do you always have to be such an asshole? I beg your pardon. I'm not an asshole. I'm an actor. Same thing.